Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's time to get started. This is a webinar about iC3D Suite and about something new called iC. It will probably be a relatively short webinar. Meanwhile, sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and enjoy the talk about these two topics today. I'm going to be talking about some of the changes in 3.6, but actually also about some of the changes in 3.5, as I discovered earlier today that we didn't really do a webinar about that, and there are quite some changes in both of those versions. So I've grouped them together in logical topics, and we'll be covering both of those at first. And then the second part of this will be about iC3D iC, and I'm not going to give away yet what that is. If you haven't heard about that, you'll have to wait until the second part of this webinar. Okay, time to get started. First of all, with the changes in 3.5 and 3.6. This is not a major update of the product, of course, but still, if you look at what has changed, you'll see that it's relatively significant. And I won't be showing everything. I will be talking about some of this and showing some of the other things that are changed, but I think it's important to go through this. And the first thing is about backgrounds, and as I enjoy showing software much more than showing presentations, I'm already going to go to the software. Meanwhile, by the way, have you seen the new icon here? Much nicer than the old icon. It's a small thing, but aesthetics are important as well sometimes. So if I go to iC3D Suite, I can go to lighting, and in every scene that I build with iC3D Suite, you have these different lighting environments, and I can show those or hide them. If they are hidden, I still use the light and shadow from these images. If they are visible, of course, I see my object within that scene. In iC3D Suite 3.5, what got added in this panel is a couple of things. First of all, the ability to import high-resolution versions of these images. As you can see here, the resolution that I have is limited, and in 3.5, you can now, simply by using this little button here, the open button, you can have high-resolution versions of those images, and iC3D Suite will effectively also use those. Just as a small reminder, iC3D Suite now reminds you of that as well, but keep in mind that loading images takes a long time. It can actually take up to 30 minutes to load a single background image. But once it is loaded, as you know, the processing, the rest of it, scrolling around in this and putting objects in this is real time. So it's a one-time thing. Just don't start loading 10 background images half an hour before you have an important deadline that you're working towards. While I am here, the other thing I want to show is that perhaps you know that, but you can also have an image here, a static image as a background, and that so any object I now have, any model that I add to this is shown on top of that background. I'm not sure that purple background is ideal, but it shows very nicely what I want to show here. You can have that centered. I can have that in one of the corners, so my image is larger in this case than the actual viewport that I have. And in 3.5, the ability to fit that image to screen was added as well. So now I actually see the complete image, and as I change the window size, the image will also be stretched to keep filling the whole viewport. Or I can ask iC3D Suite to lock that, and then it will remain in place at the size where I had it before as well. And that can help to keep the object positioned in a very specific way towards the background image that I added. If you no longer want the background image, you simply delete it with that button, and I could go back to my background here. So in terms of backgrounds, that's a few new features in 3.5 and 3.6, relatively small, but not unimportant. More important is the subject of lighting, and there are two things that got added to iC3D Suite. One is something called ambient occlusion lighting or shadowing, and what that basically means is that a type of soft shadow is created automatically based on the lighting that you have in your environment. So for places of an object that are not really accessible or accessible only in a difficult way by environment lighting, you'll now automatically get shadow created in your model. And the result is that you get models with a lot more depth perception. They look more real, not as flat as they otherwise would look. And then the second point is, and I'll be showing both of those in a second, but the second point is that you can create your own light setups. And those are used for shadows, to create shadows. And that means that if I position a number of lights around my object, you can have as many lights as you want. All of those lights will throw an additional shadow on the object and on the floor under the object as well. And again, this can vastly improve the look and feel of the and the realism of the object that you have in iC3D Suite. So let's go back here and get rid of this and load something else. And then go to special effects. Now, this is one of the default objects that you have in iC3D Suite. It's like a cap on the top of the bottom of a bottle or something like that. And you can see that there is some lighting that already plays over this. But what I can do now is I can, in the special effects area, state that I want ambient occlusion, and this is so nice that by default it is actually on, and that ambient occlusion provides, let me switch that off again and then on again, that ambient occlusion, you will see that mostly in those difficult to reach areas in the model. So these grooves that you have here are ideal, but you'll also see, and I can make this effect a lot stronger. That's too much. That I wouldn't do this in reality, but it allows you to have a more photorealistic object. And by setting it all the way, you can see that it is at the bottom and in between the actual object. That's ambient occlusion. Like I said, it's on by default. Once you set that for a model, it will also be remembered, so you can set it to different values for different models that you create, and it will be saved in the iC3 file. And then it will give you a model with a little bit more of a depth perception in here. But you can also create real shadows by simply switching on Use Shadows here at the bottom. This is actually the front view of the object, so you can see that the shadow is thrown to the through the left there. When I rotate the object, the shadow goes along with that, and you can see that it is a real shadow on the floor under the object, and the lighting on the object itself changes as well. The object is literally in the shadow at the back here. These setups can be changed. I have created already a number of different setups here, but I can simply edit those as well. So if I have a lighting setup, then I can determine how many lights I have in that scene. I can give them a name if that makes it easier. And I can change all of the parameters of that light. So the height above the horizontal of that light, the horizontal position, so where the light is in position to the actual object, then the opacity of the shadow, so how dark is it, the softness of the shadow, and that's mainly near the edge of that shadow that is thrown, of course, and then a fade value that determines how quickly that shadow dissipates as well. So all of those can be customized, and of course I can then use multiple lights as well. Again, this is saved in the model, and we'll see later when we talk about OPSIS that is quite important. But those lights that you configure are saved in that setup is saved in the iC3 file. So you can create that model exactly the way you want. If you export it, those shadows will of course be exported as well in those media that support that. So yes, if you export to an image, for example, then that will be there. It might be more difficult in other formats such as 3D PDF, for example. So two things about lighting, or rather two things about shadow that are actually quite important. The next thing is that, and this was also mainly in 3.5, is that there are a number of additions to the templates, and I'm being told that the sound is not very good. So let me see if I can fix that. Not sure what's. Hopefully that's made it a little better. The additions to the templates are also best shown in iC3D Suite itself, of course, and those are in the template library. If you've done anything with iC3D Suite, then you know that these templates allow you to configure something and then add it to your scene as an object. And the new templates allow you to create new types of objects. So the first one that I want to show is this tube, relatively simple, but again with configuration for all of the important parts. So I can configure the seal here at the bottom. You can configure how the artwork is laid out in your Illustrator or your PDF file. Important, of course, once you start adding artwork to this object afterwards. I can configure the height of the nozzle that I have here. So if I put that to 19, I get a much longer nozzle there. Same with all of the other parameters that you have. And in the end, this is a templates designer. So in the end, I simply add that to my scene. And by clicking the Illustrator button, or if I switched to one of the other editors, the other button, by clicking on that button, it will open up in Illustrator, give me an empty layout in Illustrator that I can then place the artwork on top of. This is just a model now, so of course I can change the material. That in that sense, it behaves exactly the same as the other template designers. So that's one, that's a tube. Then the second one that I very quickly want to highlight is the shaped bag template, and the purpose of that, well, you recognize that, of course. This could be a candy bar or a chocolate bar, but it can actually be used for many different things. It has a number of important properties. The first one is that you can change the way the folds and seals work at the top and bottom. So depending on the type of object that you're trying to create, that's one thing that you can adjust. The second thing is that once you have that correct, you can then set the different types of artwork, and you can see a little preview every time of how that looks. So that's important to set correct so that it matches what you're doing here, matches the artwork and the layout of the artwork that you have gotten for that shaped bag. And then the most important part in this new template designer is the fact that the shape of the bag is determined by a cross section that you can create in Illustrator. And if you've worked with these, with the shape modeler in iC3D Suite, then you know the concept of these cross sections. So that's as if this object would have been cut, and I just take the cross section of that cut. But by simply changing what I have in there, the whole model now changes. So that shape that I create here or load here is actually behaves as if it is inserted in that shaped bag. And I can either use the same shape or I can create a different shape in different places. This will look a little weird, but now I have a transition from one shape at the bottom to another shape at the top. Or I can go to options and I can also determine, let me do this kind of spectacularly, I can also change the width or depth of different parts of the object. And specifically when you're trying to give the impression of something that is heavy inside one of those bags, when you use it more as a bag than you use it as a candy wrapper, for example, then this could help in creating the look and feel of the content being pushed down by gravity in that bag. So you can play with that. I can play with the position of the content in there and so on. So this is a very flexible template designer. But again, once I have finished it, I can do add model to scene. Before you do that, you should also save the parameters that you've entered in here so that you can load them again if you need to change anything afterwards. If you're done, you press add to scene, and again, you get something that is a model. It has different parts, and I can give those different parts different materials, just as that works with any model that I have in iC3D Suite. So that's the second one that I wanted to highlight a little bit. Then there is one that already existed, and that's the shelf visualizer, but that has been expanded with a number of default options. So if I add that, I used to have only this shelf, and when I add this shelf would be added as an object, and then I can change the material. I can even change the labels that I have here or delete those altogether. In the newer versions of iC3D Suite, you now also have the ability to have a whole gondola of shelves. So you have 5 shelves here. Or I can do a refrigerated unit that has shelves and then looks like, well, the refrigerators you see in a store, or the same thing but with doors at the front. And these objects that you have here, so all of these different templates that you can start from allow you to set the width of the whole object, and if you add them to the scene, they are still added as individual objects. So if I would go to do I have a black metal somewhere? Painted metal. So if I would apply that, I can still modify the different shelf layouts. I think this looks quite fun. They should do that in department stores perhaps, but that shows you that all of these different parts you have here, and you can see that here on the left as well in the object editor, shows you that these different parts can now be adjusted individually as well. And while I'm talking about the object editor, there is a new thing in here in version 3.6 as well, and that is if you ever import models that don't have a base artwork mapping, a UV mapping for the model itself, then you can now add a UV mapping with a particular style. Now, that will happen automatically, so you might not get the same flexibility here, or you will not get the same flexibility here as you would have in a real 3D object editor, where you can adjust that UV mapping to your in detail. But at least this will add something to the object so that you can then apply artwork to those models automatically and add content to that. So that's an option that was added in 3.6. Okay, let's get rid of that. And then there is one last little thing that I want to show, and that is also in the template library, but this time in the shape modeler. And this requires a little bit of practice, but in the shape modeler so far, what you have is the ability to create models out of cross sections again. And here you have these cross sections again that I already highlighted before. So that gives me a little tube. And I also had the ability to change this to a curve. So I can make kind of a vase or something like that. And let me put the amount of arc divisions a little higher. I'm not smoothing anything simply because my video card is not the strongest here in this computer. So that is something that I could do for a couple of versions now. In the latest version, you also have the ability to do this. And then the arcs that you have, the arc that you create is now a double arc, a parallel arc for that section. And that allows you to create things that start to look like handles. It also allows you to create bottles that are slanted to one side, so really asymmetrical in the way they are built. And it enhances, again, the possibilities that you have to build objects with the shape modeler. Of course, what I could not do here is build a cup because that is, you have the actual cup part and then you have the handle at the side. But you could create, with this, you could create the handle separately and then add that to the object in iC3D Suite. So if I create this as an object, I could then create the cup and then start to piece these two things together so that I have a vase or a cup or an asymmetrical a bottle. So Shape Modeler has been there for a while now, but this is an addition that again makes it possible to create some new shapes with that Shape Modeler if you need it. Okay. So let's go back to the presentation for a second. So that's the changes that I wanted to highlight in 3.5 and 3.6. It's a small overview. As you know, there is a demo version of iC3D Suite that you can simply download and play with. But as you also hopefully know, just send us an email and I will be more than happy to do a one-on-one go-to-meeting session with you and highlight some of these features in a lot more detail, perhaps also look at some of the projects or files that you are interested in building with this. The second major topic of this webinar is an introduction of what is called iC3D OPSIS, and that is a new product but integrated into iC3D Suite. And OPSIS comes from the Greek word of theater. It's also used to signify mise en scène, so the positioning of or the presentation of a scene with objects to a viewer. And that is a very, very good description of what it does. If you look at iC3D Suite today, then the versions that you've probably have experience with, then there are different ways to present your work. And hopefully you've discovered all of those under the export menu. But from a model that you've created, you can create high resolution images at different viewing positions or camera positions. You can export Collada files if you want to continue working with the model you created in iC3D Suite in some other 3D application. You can also build animations either by simply rotating the object with your mouse and recording what you do as a QuickTime, or by building more elaborate animations, keyframe animations in iC3D Suite. And then you can export a PDF that contains a bunch of different images of your object in it, or a 3D PDF. So All of those different ways of sharing information already existed. The problem is that it is still, with all of those, a challenge to present a high-quality 3D model, especially when you have created a model that has special materials like foils, very reflective materials, transparent parts in an object or transparent objects altogether, bottles with a fluid inside. All of those things are really, really difficult to accurately share as a 3D model. You can make high-res images out of it, and those will look good because they are rendered by iC3D Suite. And of course, you could already export them to 3D PDF, but then as you probably know, 3D PDF is rather limited in what it can handle. And so all of those high-end features like those special materials and the transparencies and so on cannot be represented in 3D PDF. So you end up with something that is visually really unpleasant looking when you compare it to what you have in iC3D Suite. The only option so far was to share the person you want to show it to. So share your iC3 file and then use the iC3D viewer. Now, the good thing about the viewer is that it's free. It's a free application for Mac and Windows that anyone can download from the Creative Edge website. The downside is that it's an application. So people viewing your models will have to install software on their computer. And in many environments, especially when you start looking at brand owner environments, this is often a problem because the software that can be used there is restricted. The second problem with that, if you're on the creation side of these models, is that you have to share your iC3 files. And not only are those iC3 files typically big files because they contain all the artwork that you've applied to models, but you might not want to share those because that's literally the work that you've been doing. That's all the time you invested in there that you're giving away to someone else. So even with the free viewer, it's still not an ideal scenario. Now, iC3D Opsys was created to solve that problem, and it solves it by, first of all, being a web platform, which means that you don't need to install any software. It is accessed simply through a browser. It also does a lot of optimization, and it has a balance between the detail and the smoothness and fluidity that you have in preview through the web and quick download time. So they've tried to find a balance there. Very, very importantly, it will show your models that you've created in iC3D Suite with the same quality level as what you see in iC3D Suite itself. So if you design something with all of those high-end features like special materials and transparencies, then iC3D Opsys will show exactly the same thing. And from a reliability point of view and reliability and communication point of view between you and a client, that is a very key point. Also, the way this is done is without sharing the iC3 files. You don't even upload the iC3 file to the Opsys platform. It is a derivative of your iC3 file that is uploaded. And it doesn't use any special technology on the web platform side. So if I am viewing this on Mac or on Windows or on Linux, or I'm viewing it on an iPhone or an iPad or an Android tablet, it doesn't matter. There are no plugins for the browser. There is no special wizardry going on. It is simply HTML5 that is used to present these models to the user. So it actually will work on an iPad, for example. The way this works is that you create a model in iC3D Suite, and that once your model is created, you can, from within iC3D Suite, upload it to the Opsys platform. And if you have a license for iC3D Suite today, then you automatically also get access to the OPSIS platform. The access that you get for free with iC3D Suite is limited. More specifically, it's limited to 100 objects that you have on the platform at any given time. But because you can manage the objects that you have on there, and you can delete stuff once it's no longer relevant, you can decide which objects are on there. So you always have room for 100 models that you can share. And you can share those with clients without requiring them to have access to the platform. The only thing they need is a secure URL that you can provide them with. They don't need a user account. They don't need a username and a password. They don't need to log in. They don't have a lot of overhead, user interface overhead. They just see the model that you want to share with them. On the other hand, if you are working with iC3D Automate, the automated version of the suite, so and there will be a webinar shortly to go into a little bit more detail on what you can do with iC3D Automate as well. But if you're working with the automated version, then that one is also capable of uploading models to the OPSIS platform as well. So you could automate that aspect of the process as well. Now, let's go back to iC3D Suite, and what we want to do is, well, we actually want a model of some sort, and I'll take something very simple. So I'll show you a number of different models on the OPSIS site, but I'm going to take just a standard model here, an apple, and then under Export, you'll see a new option. This is starting with version 3.6, so if you don't have that menu item, it means you're running 3.5 and you should upgrade. You see a new menu item called iC3D OPSIS, and by selecting that, I get the opportunity to specify my details. You can see the link to OPSIS here at the bottom of the dialog window. This is something that you can configure in the preferences for iC3D Suite, and that opens up the opportunity to not use the public OPSIS platform, but, for example, within your company, install a private OPSIS server that you can then upload models to, and that only people that have the correct access can then access. So it's open technology in that sense. With iC3D Suite licenses, you get access to the standard iC3D OPSIS platform, but there are definitely other things you can do around that. Then I have my username and my password. I have a model name, well, I guess we should call that Apple. I can give that a job ID, and you'll see that you don't have to do that, but it is useful because you can also search on the OPSIS platform afterwards. And then I could attach a customer name to that as well. Again, something that I can search on. And then also, interestingly, what you can see here is that if I had a timeline animation, and that's the animations that you create in the animation tab in iC3D Suite. If I had created a timeline animation, then I can export that timeline animation to OPSIS. Now, I haven't done that, but because for many objects, it's actually enough to create a spin animation, so that the object basically rotates around the vertical axis automatically. I'm going to enable that, and then I said enable that, thank you. And then I'm going to send that to OPSIS. And what you'll see is that it takes a little time to actually upload that. The reason it takes some time is that it is not the actual 3D model that gets uploaded to the OPSIS platform. Instead, there is a conversion from the model I have here to the data that is needed to show the model on OPSIS. And that will take a few seconds. I will let it continue to do that. And while it is doing that, and well, you can see that it started exporting animation data now. After that, it will do the actual upload. But while it is doing that, I'm going to go to my browser. Doesn't really matter which one. I have Safari in this case. And on my browser, this is the same site that I have here. I can log in with my username and password, and then I see a bunch of files on here. Now I'm going to take one of those and say view, and that downloads some images to my computer. So the object is actually represented with a number of rendered images, but you can see that even though it's not completely fluid, I can rotate this and see the object from all different sides. I have some light playing over this object. This is exactly the same as what I had in iC3D Suite, so visually there will be no difference between those. You can see that I have a gray background for this object, but that's because I had a gray background for the object in iC3D Suite as well. If I had the background image, or if I loaded my own 2D background with a logo on it, for example, then that would be the background that I get there as well. I have some zoom possibilities. It is limited. There are 3 zoom settings in the default settings for an OPSIS platform. And you can see that the quality of the rendering to read the text, for example, is actually quite good. Again, that's because the rendering is done by iC3D Suite itself, so you get exactly the same quality as I would have in iC3D Suite. And then lastly, this one was also exported with this spin animation. So that's the animation that by default is put in there if you enable that export spin animation checkbox. So that's what happens for a model. Meanwhile, I'm sure that my apple was uploaded as well. And after the upload was done, this is the kind of link that you get. And if I copy that and I put it in my browser, I'll just take a new browser tab. Then without logging in or doing anything else, I am taken again to this OPSIS viewer. You can see that there is no management interface now. I don't have any buttons. I have nothing else. The only thing I have is the ability to view the object, rotate, view the spin animation, zoom in and out. And that's it basically. But it gives you a way to share a model with someone by simply sharing the URL. It's a little bit difficult to show across the GoToWebinar session here, but I could just as well have viewed this on my iPad and I would get the same appearance and performance there. So it works very well on a mobile platform as well, which means that you could just take a tablet to a customer and view the files over the web on a tablet. And of course, because this is simply URL, you can share it either through email or by any means that you would normally use to share it with a customer. Once you're done, so if I go back here to my OPSIS platform and let me refresh that, and now I have an apple here at the bottom. The reason I can add these names of customers, for example, is that I can search on that as well. So this is the apple that we just uploaded. At any time, you can delete that model again from OPSIS, and there is a count here at the top that tells you what the free space is that you have at the moment. So I have 15 models uploaded out of a default 100 models that come when with iC3D Suite in general. So at any time I can upload any of them. Just to show you that this also works with other backgrounds than this ugly gray that I usually use. this is a model that was actually placed in a store environment, and that works just as well. So this is the exact same view as what I had in iC3D Suite again. Okay, that is, I believe, what I wanted to share with you today. So the only thing that is left is looking at if there are any additional questions. I can see one question that is probably already answered meanwhile. If you have your own questions, don't hesitate and fill them in the GoToWebinar control panel. The question that I have here: can you share this Apple URL? Yes, as I showed in the rest of the demo, that is entirely the intention. So the intention is that you don't even need a username and password for the OpSys platform. You don't need an account. The only thing that you need is a URL, and that will enable anyone with that URL to view the model that you shared with them. Small recap. If you remember what we talked about changes in 3.5 and 3.6. So a lot of focus on shadows, a lot of focus on OpSys at the when we talk about something else than changes. So that's the main two topics that we talked about: new template designers and shadows and so on, background improvements, and then OpSys. I had another question: can you share the URL with today's participants? I don't know what URL you are referring to, but there are a few things that you can do. If you download and install iC3D Suite 3.6. So that's the first version where this was introduced. If you have that, then you can simply request an account for OpSys as well. That would allow you not only to create models in iC3D Suite, but also to upload them to OpSys and see how that behaves. If any one of you wants to look at a model in OpSys and see what the possibilities are without downloading iC3D Suite, then simply send me a short email. I think I didn't actually put my email address on here. Usually I do that. So actually you can use david@4ps.com for that. Just send me a short email and I can share one of those URLs to one of the objects that I have in our OpSys platform. That will be a demo file, of course, but if I share one or two or three different URLs with you, you would be able to see in OpSys how that looks, play with the zoom levels, play with the look at the display quality, perhaps look at that on an iPad and so on. So if you want that, just drop me a short email and I will be happy to provide that as well. Okay, good. That's what I wanted to talk about today. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. There are a number of webinars planned for the upcoming weeks. You can find the information for those on the 4Ps website. Thank you very much for joining. I'm sure I will encounter many of you in one of those next webinars. And then the only thing that rests me is to wish you a very pleasant rest of the day. Thank you, and until next time.